Hi, I'm Tom Stephenson and welcome to Construction Business Management. In today's video lecture, we're going to be looking at negotiating in the world of construction. In the construction industry, as I talked about in my previous video on selling, we are all selling and negotiating all the time. In construction, we're not just negotiating a contract to get an actual job from our client. We're also negotiating change orders, we're negotiating with subcontractors, we're negotiating with neighbors on access and different things like that. So I don't see how you can get into the construction business without spending some time on trying to become a better negotiator. Negotiating is a skill and it requires a good understanding of the process, and it requires a lot of practice, self-reflection, and deliberate practice to get better. So we're all negotiators, as I said, and some are better than others. Some people are kind of born with a little bit more talent in that area, but then they never really work on developing it. Others have less talent and they work a lot at developing it and become really, really good at it. So it's something that we can really build upon. Don't think it's a fixed skill that we can't improve upon, because we can improve upon it and we can get better at it, and we can practice it with a lot of our interactions, our family, our other employees that we work with. We're doing it all the time, as I said. And really, negotiating is a way of getting what you want, which generally requires providing something of value to the other party. So it's, what can I get? Usually if it's a GC, as far as compensation for the work that we're going to be doing, but I have to provide that product or service, that build or that service on whatever building or equipment that we're working on. And it's a process, and it doesn't have to be a win-lose process. In the previous video, we talked about the short game and the long game. Well, if you're going to make it a win-lose process, then you are going to lose in the long run. You may win sometimes on the short run, but you won't in the long game. And so it really is about striking a mutually beneficial deal. I quote a lot of stuff from this book, and I think there's even been updated editions. Getting to Yes from Roger Fisher and William Ury. And Bruce Patton. I've seen William Ury speak at Rotman at University of Toronto. He's done some follow-up books to this before Getting to Yes and those types of books. But this is really the foundational book, and it's really a well-recognized piece of work. And he's worked at Harvard in the negotiation projects that they've had at Harvard University. And so he's got a lot of international experience negotiating deals. So I really value that particular book. And so he describes that people have positional negotiating styles that they kind of orient themselves to. And I think you can find that comes from how you were brought up, how your parents negotiated, your cultural background. There's a lot of influences that come into play, your innate personality types, etc. And keep in mind, think people aren't always soft and always hard, and it kind of depends too. It's a little bit different if you're in the marketplace and you're haggling over something than if you are negotiating a multi-million-dollar construction project, right? But definitely, there are the soft and the hard styles of negotiators. And I'll just preface before I go through some of these, neither one is considered great. So, no matter which side you fall, neither one is considered great. Like, soft negotiators tend to really want the deal, and they're willing to make concessions to cultivate relationships. And they're not hard on the other people, so they're soft on the people and the problem. They have a lot of trust and empathy for others, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But the problem is, if a soft negotiator runs into a hard negotiator, they're probably going to come out short. They're probably going to regret that they entered the deal. They're going to have buyer's remorse, right? A hard negotiator, on the other hand, they see everything as a competition. I win, you lose. The goal is victory at all costs. Demand concessions. Be really hard on the people. Mistrust others. Really dig into the position. Make threats. And they may win on the short term, depending on the circumstances and the leverage that they have on the other party. I can think of businesses where they've been in negotiations with their union, with their employees, and they've come across really hard and tough. And quite frankly, it was kind of down economic times, and the union didn't have as much leverage. And so maybe they settled, well, maybe the next contract negotiation, the economy is really roaring. They have a lot of leverage because business doesn't want to go on strike because they'll lose all these sales. And they'll be the hard ones. And I don't know if either side wins. And plus, when they go back after the strike, the employees are disgruntled and they're not happy. That's not exactly a catalyst for a world captivating, growing business. So hard negotiators, that's not really a positive thing either. So hard negotiators can win on the short game, especially against a soft negotiator. Hard against hard, it probably just ends up in no deal or in the court system. But they tend to lose over the long term, right? And so neither one is a very good place to be. A few more points on that. Disclose their bottom line openly, mislead, misdirect, demand one-sided gains as the price of an agreement, accept one-sided losses to reach the agreement. So you can see how one side could take advantage of the other. And really sort of yield to pressure while the other is applying the pressure. Well, there's a better way, all right? There's a better way of looking at negotiation. So if you can have an open mind for a little bit, let's see if we can walk through that. In the Getting to Yes, they talk about the balanced method of negotiating. So rather also they get into a lot of depth about positional bargaining. You set a position and you let that position sort of represent where you're coming from. The problem is your ego gets in the way of that too. And that becomes problematic as well. So the balanced method of negotiation really tries to, number one, make it not personal. You're not the problem. This is the problem. So when we're in construction, maybe you've got a set of construction drawings on your iPad. You could make the construction drawings the issue. We're discussing this. This is the problem. You're not the problem. This is the problem. We're trying to work this out. So that gets egos out of the way and gets emotions out of the way, keeps it more professional. So that's a positive. Focus on interests, not on positions. So again, you get stuck in this position that you got to get something. Then you also get framed by it. If you've kind of told others in your company, we're going to do this and we're going to do that, you're kind of stuck to that position, and then you don't want to lose space during that negotiation process. So you really dig your heels in. That probably leads to no deal. So focus on interests. Try to find out what's their interest, because maybe what you're discussing, there's more to it than just what's there. And the only way you know that is if you understand the interests. Options. Well, in construction, I can think of no better industry where you can have different options for things. If something's too expensive, maybe there's other options that are less expensive. If something's going to take too much time, maybe there's other ways of getting occupancy and using the facility, or at least part of the facility, before the whole project is finished. There may be other options and pathways that you can provide. So being really good on the options side can be really helpful at getting to a closed and signed contract. And also making sure that things that you're agreeing upon are noted and that they're measurable. So if it's really clear, it's put into the contract, then you don't have those gray areas for disagreement later on. The more clarity and transparency there is, the better it is. So those are 4 important points to think about from the balanced approach. And when we think about building a good working relationship, You can think about turning a stranger into somebody you have a relationship with, and building that relationship is very, very strong. I've mentioned it before. That's what I like about one of my clients, Aliston, that I've worked with a lot, is they have, and we talked about this, I think, going back to one of the earlier videos when we talked about mission and we talked about vision and core values. Well, for sure, one of their core values is that they want to build great relationships, and they say it and they act upon it, right? And really, the best time to build a relationship is not when you've got difficulty. The best time is coming up to that, like before that ever happens, or you're trying to close on something. If you've already built a good rapport, makes it a lot easier. And it also then makes it a lot easier for you to discuss other options and potential pathways so that you can get to that agreement. So that requires asking a lot of questions. Questions are good things. Ask a lot of questions, and we talked about that in the selling area. Remember I said selling and negotiating, the previous video to that. If you haven't seen it, make sure you click the subscribe icon, and you'll go under the playlist Construction Business Management on my channel. You'll see all the other videos, and I'll also put a listing of them in the description below. Benjamin Franklin. So this was in Walter Isaacson's biography of Benjamin Franklin. And he talked about how Benjamin Franklin had a favorite technique, which was to borrow a book from an adversary. He had this adversary that when he first got into politics, that really did not like him. And this adversary was really, really wealthy, had a private library, and really was always kind of backstabbing Franklin and really didn't like him. And Franklin thought, well, you know, I could get very adversarial too, but that wasn't really his way. He thought, well, maybe I can make a friend out of this individual. And he heard that he had this great library, and there was a book genuinely that Franklin wanted to read that he didn't have. Franklin had an amazing library himself. And he asked if he could borrow the book, that he was interested in reading it. And remember we said in the previous video to give praise and to acknowledge the other individual. Well, that would be a good example of an opportunity to do that. You know, compliment them on their library. Back then, there weren't the public libraries, and books were more difficult. Good books were more difficult to get a hold of and were very expensive. And so the other individual gladly lent him the book. And when Franklin returned it, he asked him a few questions about the book. And Franklin, of course, did read the book because he was interested in reading the book. And so they struck a great friendship after that. And that adversary became one of Franklin's strongest, deepest, and longest allies. So that's how these things can work. They don't have to be conflict-ridden for life. You can actually turn an adversary into an ally. Another key point from the book was develop your BATNA. I really like this one. I've used it a number of times. And so it's best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So if you're going into an agreement, remember we talked about the soft side, and you really, really want this agreement, it's probably not putting you in a very good position. You want it too badly. So if you go into the agreement negotiating process, with a best alternative to a negotiated agreement, that's going to put you in a very good position. And as I've said in other course videos where I've talked about negotiation, this is very important because you're not that stressed because you've got plan B. You know, if this doesn't work, this is what we're going to do. I've heard people say, well, you shouldn't have any other options and you should go in and you've got to resolve this. I don't think that's a good way of doing it. And neither does Uri in the book that he discusses, BATNA. Really, BATNA, you go into it and, you know, you've got something else. I had that. I put an example here when I was offered the job of director at our college. And I was faculty, and to be honest, at that time the director's job, it didn't pay much better than a faculty job. It had a lot more responsibility, it had a lot more risk, and I didn't see the advantages to it. And being somebody that wasn't all about title, then I was really wondering, well, why am I going to do this? So I was negotiating for extra money, and I remember the dean at the time saying to me, well, Tom, there's a reason why the players get paid more than the coaches. but I'd previously negotiated an out. I could always go back to faculty. And so at that point I said, yeah, but all coaches don't have the opportunity to still be players. So I just went back to faculty. It was really nice going into that negotiation to have a BATNA. So nice. It was really, really good. And I've done that a number of times, and it has worked pretty much every time that I've done it. Sometimes I've reached the agreement and sometimes I haven't, but either way, I was okay with it and I wasn't desperate about it. That was a very good position to be in. And to be honest, at that time, I probably would have taken the director's position if there had been some leeway, but there really wasn't. And I was quite happy to go back to being faculty. So it is something that you can think about. I always told my daughter the same thing. If she was in a job and she really didn't like it, I said, don't quit this job quite yet, because if you're being interviewed, well, you've got a BATNA. If something in this interview doesn't seem right, or in the negotiation for the job doesn't seem right, you've got a best alternative. If this doesn't work, you still got the other job. So you're not more desperate. And people can see that when they're negotiating with you. If you seem like you really want it really, really badly, it comes across, having seen it and witnessed it and experienced it a number of times. So BATNA is helpful. So the other thing is, it can be win-win, as we said. It does not have to be win-lose. And we can think about it like a pizza, if you will. And you got this pizza and it's this size. Does it have to be that size? Or maybe we've got options. Maybe we've got other things that we can agree upon to expand this deal, that it's going to be beyond what we originally thought. And if that's the case, maybe then we're talking about 2 pizzas here instead of 1 pizza. And it can be a win-win for both sides. It's not that we have to have this fixed pizza that we have to take slices from. And the other thing is, you don't necessarily have to have as many slices as the other individual, as long as you're coming away from this agreement in a better situation than you were before and you're satisfied with it, then that's a positive. The perfect example would be when I sign a contract with a publisher. Well, I'm never going to get the same amount per book that they get, but as long as I'm getting something that's representative and acceptable under the circumstances, then that's fine. That's fine. It's a win-win situation. They have certain things that they do and I have certain things that I do. And if that seems like it's a win, then that's a win. So you just got to look at that and look at it from that perspective. And don't get caught up that this is this fixed pie. There's very often, if you take a minute and you look at things from different viewpoints and different perspectives, there's a lot more options than you think, especially when we're talking about construction projects, right? Make sure that you're also negotiating with whoever is the decision maker, because that's kind of pointless if you're not, because then they can't make the decisions. And then their information is getting transferred secondhand and third hand. That's never a good situation. Making sure that you understand the personal goals of the negotiator. What are they trying to achieve? What kind of pressure are they under? The time frame allowance for this. If you can, sometimes having a pause that you can think about things is important. Make sure that you're not going into it with certain financial pressures. Understand the financial pressures of the other party. That might allow you to offer better options, less costly options, etc. So tying into goals and what you're trying to achieve is important, and having that clarified. And if the other side's not really clear on it, helping them to get more clarity on it so it makes it easier for them to reach an agreement is important as well, right? And what are their alternatives if they don't make the deal with you? Like, looking at it from, I already said have a BATNA for yourself, but what are their alternatives, right? And what's your competition on this? To advance your skills, you should think about it from this perspective. Make it a habit to critique your performance after every negotiation. Selling and negotiating. You want to get better? You got to practice, but then you got to reflect, and you've got to look at and get feedback. And then you've got to think about, well, what could you have done better? And then from that point, you want to, the next time, try something a little bit different, or try to improve on some of the things that you were doing. Keep notes on how you did on that and follow up on that to see how you're improving. Deliberate practice. You don't get better without deliberate practice. You're every time, if you think about it, you will slowly get better. That's why somebody that's a salesperson that we talked about, when they get the door slammed in their face 1,000 times, they get instant feedback. Well, that didn't work. Maybe if I tweak this. Well, that didn't work. Maybe if I tweak that. Well, that didn't work. Maybe if I do this. Oh, that worked. Maybe if I do this again. No, it still didn't quite work. Maybe if I do that. And you start to get really good feedback. That's one of the nice things about those kind of sales calls. You get very quick feedback, and then you get to try it very soon after again, and you keep working at that. Then that helps you get along with it and improve. It's almost like if you ever saw the movie Groundhog Day with Bill Murray. There's a lot of life lessons in that movie if you look for it. So we also can think about if it's an important multi-million dollar projects that we can be involved in negotiations with in construction, then we might want to do a little bit of role playing, practicing, looking at it from us, have somebody play like they're the client. That's questions that they might ask you. Also, you could reverse role play where you're the client and somebody else is trying to make the sale, and it makes you think of how they might respond, questions they might ask, and how might they look at things. Putting it in their shoes, going back to Dale Carnegie and How to Win Friends and Influence People. And practice, practice, practice. That will get you better. Never fall in love with the deal. Think of real estate and bidding wars. It does not always end well for the purchaser. And we talked about the BATNA, and that will help you in that case. And use the balanced approach. So some questions to ponder, I think. Do you consider yourself a hard or soft negotiator? Ask yourself. Myself, typically, I considered myself a soft negotiator till I started using the more balanced approach with things. Identify tools that work for you when negotiating. So what are some of the things? Try them. I said BATNA works really well for me as an example. What area could you improve upon? Where's your, maybe from the balanced approach, you haven't considered taking the people first, making something else the problem, not making you the problem. It can get into things like body techniques. Like if you're close to somebody doing this is threatening because it's almost like a chokehold. Where if you're more open-handed, that's considered to be more positive. So there's been some research on those kind of things as well when you're negotiating. If you're like this, that's not great. If you're on the other side of a table, that's not necessarily as good either. A round table is considered to be better, where you're both kind of looking sideways at the problem. And in construction, that can be your project or what have you. It could be at a screen where there's what you're looking at. Can be helpful. So you can look at positioning. There's a bunch of things that can be added to this process that helps to make you more effective at negotiating. And the other thing is, if you don't ask, you don't get. So I'm going to repeat that. If you don't ask, you don't get. People that are more on the timid side or the soft side, or they feel embarrassed, they don't do so well because they never ask. My wife was a professional negotiator, and she negotiated many multi-million-dollar contracts. And I always enjoyed watching her negotiate things. It's always been fun too. Like, she'll always ask. You bring back something from a grocery store and it's past the due date. She would take it back. Well, most people would take it back. They get there. A lot of people wouldn't even bother taking it back. She would always take it back. But she would not just want her money back or not just want another product with a better date. She would say, well, what about all the time and effort? You shouldn't have had this on the shelf. But she'd be very nice about it. And if she wasn't getting the result with the person she was talking to, could I talk to your manager, please? I just wanted to go through this with them. And she'd come out, she'd have the other product, like the replacement, and maybe she'd have a $25 or a $50 gift card for her time and effort. If you don't ask, you don't get. And I was always like that myself. I wouldn't ask. And then I started to ask, and I started to get better at it. And I started to, this works really, really good. If you go to a hotel, because I go to so many hotels when I'm traveling, doing consulting and that sort of thing. all across the country. Always ask for an upgrade. I get there, oh, could I have a free upgrade? You know what? I would say about 60% of the time I would get the free upgrade if there were rooms available. In other words, if it's not fully booked, they'll give you the free upgrade because it doesn't cost them anything. And they're very obliging that way. It's going to sit there empty anyway, so you get a much nicer room, maybe with a sofa and a few other things, just by asking. When I went to get snow tires last year, another good example, not last year, but the year before. And you know what? I was bringing the car to the dealer, and you know, it's a fairly nice car, and the dealer's kind of expensive, and I knew I wasn't going to get the best price there. So I got this price, and it wasn't the best. And so then I phoned around for the same from a very reputable tire place, and they were about $800 less, the snow tires. And I thought, don't ask, don't get, because it'd be much easier for me. I had to bring the car to the dealer anyways. They just do everything, and I pick it up in one shot. And otherwise, I got to take it there, and then I got to go take it to the other place, and it's 2 separate days, and it kills my time. I got to look at the value of my time as well. And so I asked, and I said, I've got this, and then they came back and they gave me the same price, and I go, wow, really, that's not fair. I would still, with the same price, go to the other one, and they gave me a better price. And at that point, then I said, okay, and I went with that. If I don't ask, I don't get, and it's just something to get used to. And then after a while, you get a thick skin to it. What can they say? No, who cares? No, that's fine. I'm going to the other place. Not a problem. But it works. It definitely works. So don't be afraid to ask, and don't be afraid to hear no, more times than not. But I'm telling you, you know, at least 50%, depends what it is, 50%. If it's not costing the other party, you're likely going to be way over 50%. If there is a cost associated with it, I still find it to be like 30 to 40%. Even when you think that you're not going to get it, you get it. So keep that in mind. Construction, there is so much change orders that we have to get skillful at. Documenting change orders and all that kind of stuff is very important to make sure that you've got those elements right. If you want to learn more on change orders and that process, look under my playlist, which would be under the cost control playlist, and you'll see I have about 3 videos on change orders and negotiating change orders and some of the challenges in that aspect. So hopefully that's given you a good idea, because this is where we're finishing off on the selling and negotiating part and the marketing part on the course that we've been discussing the last few lectures. We spent a fair chunk of time on financials and understanding the financial statements and income statements and balance sheets and cash flow and return on investment and ratios. And now we spend a fair bit of time on marketing and sales and negotiating. So we'll be moving now on to some of the engagement, motivation aspects and the human resource management aspects of running a business. So I'm Tom Stephenson. If you haven't subscribed yet, please click the subscribe, join the community. If you have any experiences in negotiating that you'd like to share with everyone as we build this community, please put it in the comments. And I wish you a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.